Welcome back, Guardians. And in the last video, we talked about Lord Shaxx, about his history and his achievements. I did talk about Zavala a little bit. He was his fellow student underneath Lord Saladin, or Saladin Forge, whichever you want to call him. As you already know, listening from the other one, Zavala was also part of the Battle of Twilight Gap. This is where Lord Shaxx and Zavala proved their worth and gave them the Lord title. I'd also give him the Hero of the Twilight Gap title, but that's not really important. You don't really hear that. When Lord Shaxx went off to do his Crucible thing, Zavala was all aboard this idea. In fact, he was a great competitor in the Crucible. He was probably one of the best to ever step foot in such arenas. Zavala is the type of guy you see in the Crucible that dominates everyone. He is untouchable. He uses the OP weapons and even the not OP weapons and can destroy you. That is what Zavala is. So the person at the top of your leaderboards, multiply that person by 2 and then you get Zavala. And if you do get that kind of guy, just go ahead and praise him. He might be the next commander of the Vanguard. But after a certain amount of time, Lord Saladin stepped down from the commander of the Vanguard and gave it to Zavala because he would have given it to Shaxx, but as you do know, Lord Saladin had some other ideas and the two weren't the best of friends. They had their differences and that ultimately gave Zavala the commander job. I don't think Shaxx would be very suitable for it because he might be yelling at you to do PvE stuff. I don't know if you want that. I don't know how much you love Lord Shaxx's commentary on PvP, but just think that you could have him also commentating some story missions. As commander, there were some rough times in the tower. Before that, there was these faction wars that went on where each of the factions were trying to grow stronger than the other, having an arms race, which ultimately led to violence. Faction on faction war within the city, and that's the worst thing you want to have, especially in the last city on Earth where everyone is concentrated into one area. But it happens. In recent history, some of these factions have been going up to Lord Zavala, now Commander Zavala, and saying they need help. Or, in New Monarchy's case, they offered him to make him king of the city if he joined their faction. Now, you might be wondering, what is this? King of the city? That's unreal. There's a speaker, even though we blindly follow him, but a king? Really? That's what the New Monarchy is. If you haven't seen my factions video about the factions of the city, you don't really know this about New Monarchy. They're trying to overthrow the consensus. Right now they're doing it passively, but I'm afraid in the near future they might actually use some violence. It's possible. Now when you look at the word New Monarchy, it legitimately means New Monarchy of the last city. And your king, if he accepted, would have been Commander Zavala, or King Zavala. But he declined, luckily. Then the next faction came up and approached Commander Zavala. It was Arak Jalal, and what he wanted to do was he just wanted support for Dead Orbit. What kind of support? I don't really know, but I kind of want to say that he wanted support for him to back up the idea that leaving the last city on Earth to be destroyed by the darkness is what it is. But, Zavala is a Titan, and as you do know from lore, Titans stand and defend. They will defend the last city unto their last dying breath. And because we're talking about defending the city against a future war, if that's inevitable, the future war cult is what fits in so nicely with Zavala. If you know your lore and history about the tower, you do know that before the future war cult, there was the Concordat. As you know, the Concordat decided to overthrow the consensus. It didn't work, they got kicked out, and then that left a gap between the Symmetry and the future war cult. If you want to learn about the Symmetry, literally everything I'm referencing in this video is down below. Commander Zavala vouched for the future war cult because if you don't know their ideals, it is that a future war is coming. These names aren't really that creative, guys. The factions literally mean what they're named. Commander Zavala, very, 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 very for defending the city against no matter what war, goes with these people and raises them up to join the consensus. By doing so, this allows to focus all their combat to a more useful manner and defending the city against the dangerous darkness whenever it comes. But other than that, there isn't really that much on Commander Zavala. He hasn't really been in the role of the commander for all that long. People before him have lasted much longer and they've gone through much more. He was in the Battle of the Twilight Gap, yes, and probably one of the more interesting points of his life, which wasn't that long ago, was the whole New Monarchy thing. Because he said no to the New Monarchy's offer, he successfully and single-handedly avoided an entire war. Now, it might have not been that easy, but most people might have said yes. To be given so much power, how could you turn that down? Well, Commander Zavala believes in a much better cause. He believes in defending everyone and that everything is fine the way it is. It's worked out so far. I may be making the new monarchy look like the bad guys, but that's because I'm pro Dead Orbit. But if it wasn't for him, the faction wars would have happened all over again, and we don't want that. It does make for a good DLC, but we don't want that. But anyway guys, I'm sorry for such a short video. Commander Zavala is pretty plain and dull. His voice is pretty much it. That's the only interesting part about him, and his shoulder guard. But I had to get him out of the way. I had to do Zavala after doing Shaxx, and the next up is Elcora Ray. I'm afraid there isn't much on her either. But don't worry, these are just stepping stones to a much greater lore video. I'm trying to get everything out of the way before I can actually get there. So anyways, that's been it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Later, Guardians.